Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second day of ACCS 12. It is my great pleasure to introduce our speaker, Professor Charu Roeda. Professor Charu Roeda is one of the most influential in developmental cognitive neuroscience. She completed her PhD from University of Granada and did her postdoctoral research from institutes like University of Oregon and Sackler Institute for Developmental Psychobiology. Currently, Professor Roeda runs the Developmental Cognitive Neuroscience Lab at the University of Granada. Her work focuses on how attention and executive control develop in childhood. We are very honored to have her with us today. And now I invite Professor Nandini Chatterjee Singh from Ashoka University to chair the session. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for showing up early. And for Charo, bienvenida, Charo, okay, which is welcome in Spanish. And whilst chatting with her this morning, I learned a very interesting and important fact, which I didn't know about Spain. So I was trying to decide what I should address Charo as, because she had multiple names. And did you know that a child's name in Spanish comprises of the mother's name and the father's name? And I think this is a practice we should begin to adopt in India, okay? I think we need to give a hand to the Spaniards for doing something like this. So let's start with a round of applause and use that to also welcome Charo to the stage. Over to you for your talk, which promises to be very exciting on early foundations of executive attention development, developing the attentive brain. So your attention today started developing very many years ago, and she will tell you how and why.
Okay. Please. आप ना मिस भी कर सकते हैं हाँ मैम
But I can also go like this, right? Ah, okay. Yeah, I use it all the time. Thank you very much, Nandini, for the presentation, and I'm very honored to be here. It's a great pleasure. I was here 15 years ago for the first conference, and I'm so happy to be back, and I'm very honored to be able to present our research here in Allahabad. I want to thank Bhumika for inviting me, and also the president of the Association for Cognitive Science in India. So it's a great pleasure to be here. So yeah, a clarification about my name. So Charo is my nickname. So everyone calls me Charo. So I will turn to someone call me Charo, but I wouldn't turn to Rosario because nobody calls me that at home. So, but Rosario is my formal name. And Rueda is the last name from my dad, but I also have a second one, Cuerva, from my mom. All right, so what I'm going to be talking about is, well, I will introduce a little bit the cognitive neuroscience of attention, a little bit of theory, and then how from that broad theory about attention, we come to a theory about attention development who guides the research that I will present in the third point. So I will show you data of a new longitudinal project that we started with infants, and about the early development of endogenous voluntary attention, and how we try to find markers, brain markers of this early development, and then conclusion. Okay, so what is attention? I'm sure that I'm not going to, I don't need to explain more here in this audience, but attention, for many years, like since the cognitive revolution of the last century, has been related to three main things in very huge seminal works in all the different things, like Donald Hebb, Donald Bradben, and Daniel Kahneman. And they set up the way of thinking about attention. And of course, I drink a lot of these ideas from Mike Posner. So attention has to do with the level of activation of the organism, but also with a selection mechanism that prioritizes the information that is going to be deeply processed in the brain. So out of all the sensory input that comes to the brain, the attention has to select one for give priority and be further processed. And this is very much related to the regulation of information processing. It's very much related to the concept of consciousness. Because as William James, back in the beginning of the century, said, we are only aware of what we pay attention to. So there is a tight relationship between attention and consciousness. And there is also a very tight relationship between attention and volition, because the third aspect of cognition that has been very much related to the broad concept of attention is executive control. It's how you regulate your behavior, your actions, but not only the actions, also the thoughts, the trends of thoughts, and also the emotions. So attention is very crucial. According to this theory, is very crucial for the voluntary decisions that we make to be in synchrony with our goals. So we need to synchronize or make a coherent synchronization between what we want to do and how to do it, right? So the third concept, seminal concept, is executive control. So attention in reality is a broad concept, but it has to do, it's a mechanism for canalizing information processing toward the conscious and voluntary regulation of actions, thoughts, and emotions. So it's, as you see, it's a broad, probably not very specific definition, but it points to the fact that attention is really a general domain mechanism of the brain. Now, one more thing that is important to understand attention is the fact that attention can be controlled in two ways, more automatically or more voluntary. And it has been termed bottom-up, so the regulation of attention comes from the outside, from the nature of the stimulation, or comes from the inside, from your goals and the representation of what you want to do. And so all three functions, activation, selection, and control, can be more bottom-up or more top-down. So for example, preparation for warning cues in the activation domain is more automatic. If there is an alarm here, everyone will activate suddenly. And there is no need to make a decision for that. It's an automatic response of the organism and of the brain. But sustaining attention in a talk like this, it has to be made voluntarily. So in all three functions, you can find ways, like for example, in the domain of selection, in a scene like this, there is a stimuli, there is an item that attracts attention automatically, no matter you want it or not. But in a set like this, where you have to find your friend Ramon, then you have to have a representation of what your friend looks like, what is he wearing today, or whatever, in order to find it. And you need to scan. So one thing is to have a representation and control attention based on that representation of your goal. And another thing is that the stimuli, because of the nature of the stimuli, either the relevance or the salience, attract attention. Okay? And of course, we study this in the lab. We adapt this in, for example, a visual search task in which the target is an O or the target is an L, right? So we as cognitive scientists, we have learned to design tasks in the lab that mimic these aspects of the environment. One important thing about this distinction is that automatic bottom-up or exogenous attention, there are many, many names for this, is associated, is associated with a maximum capacity of automatization, because our brain, our body is always in the search for economizing resources. And so when attention is controlled externally, you can go automatically. But in order to have a maximal capacity of flexible adaptation to the world, you need to enter in a voluntary mode, because it's the only way in which you can adapt your behavior to different goals. And it depends on your goal. So you can have the goal of, for example, in a Stroop task, you can have the goal of reading the word or the goal of naming the color, and you need to adapt to what is the goal in order to make a coherent response. So you need to be in the voluntary mode in order to have a maximal capacity of flexible adaptation. That's why the evolution of this voluntary attention gave the Homo sapiens a whole lot of what we are today, because we have a maximum capacity of adapting, flexibly adapting to different environments. But that's another matter. Now, of course, we have used this framework to study using experimental tasks designed to target each one of the functions, like warning cues or the Posner paradigm, or conflict tasks like the flanker, Stroop, or whatever, spatial conflict, with EEG to understand the timing of brain activation, fMRI to understand the anatomy, or designs to understand the neurochemistry of every function. We have come to know that there are different circuits in the brain controlling the different functions. And of course, they are separated, but also integrated into a coherent network of attention. And also, we know that these two forms of top-down and bottom-up attention has to do with different circuits. More dorsal circuit of parietal and frontal areas that is bilateral, and bottom-up has to do with a more ventral circuit that is very much lateralized to the right hemisphere. Okay? So a summary of all the main nodes of the different circuits is in this picture. Okay, so this summarizes what Posner has been calling attention networks, so different circuits that carry out. And in this paper, in the 2012 papers and the annual review of psychology, they said probably we go from 3 networks to maybe 5 or 6, because both selection can be split into dorsal and ventral networks and control also the frontoparietal network or the cingulo-opercular network, carry out slightly different functions, right? So, but this summarizes the circuitry of these functions of attention. Okay, so now we have an idea of what attention is, an idea of what the anatomy of attention is in the brain. And so we can use these ideas to try to understand or have an hypothesis of how attention develops. And so if I use this schema here from in age for early development, from birth to 4 years, and of course, the development of attention is very, it takes a longer time. But there are two main axes of development. The first goes, like there is a kind of hierarchical organization in the three functions. So you go from the control of activation to the control of orientation or selection to the control of actions, right? So you need to control your level of activation, control your selection, and also, and the last one will be the executive control. So there is a kind of a foundation based on activation and orienting for the executive control. That's the idea. And then the second axis of development will be going from bottom-up, more exogenous control of attention to a more self-regulated, endogenous control of attention. So the kid also has to go from, like at birth, the level of activation is really very much under the control of caregivers or the nature of the stimulation. And the baby is progressively going to be more able to control their own level of activation. And same in orienting and executive control. And now, we can also this is an organization of different procedures, different experimental paradigms that have been used that can be divided or classified in this theory in procedures that measure bottom-up or exogenous attention in the domain of activation, like warning cues, or top-down endogenous, like looking duration will be more endogenous measure than the effect of a warning cue in a kid, either in the brain or behavior. And the same, so there are different paradigms that can be organized like this in order to measure these different processes, which is important because you want to know what you're measuring when you use a paradigm. You want to know exactly what part of attention, because it gives you, if you know what you're measuring, then you know what is the anatomy that you're targeting in the brain. And also this organization is also important in order to apply this procedure, for example, to understand psychopathology, right? All right. So let's talk about research. So what I'm going to present here is a study that we have been running in the last several years because the babies are now turning 7. But I'm going to present the data that we have in the early, like we started to see them, to bring them to the lab when they were 6 months, and we saw them again at 9 months, 16 to 18 months, and then 36, 3 years. But we saw also at 4 years, and now we are bringing them back at 7 years. And what we did was to use different type of acquisition, like with batteries, like cognitive batteries. At 3 years, we were using the WIPSI to target cognitive development, like general IQ. But we were using, when they were infants, we were using eye tracking for different tasks, and I'm going to show you. And one important thing is that we were using also EEG in all the waves. Like we have been using resting EEG, resting. We talked a lot about resting yesterday. So resting in all the waves, and also we were taking a lot of information from the parent. Parent reported that about child temperament, family ACCS, parenting style, and parents, well, in reality it's more mom's mental health, because it's the mom, like the one filling up the questionnaires all the time, right? So, so this is it. I'm going to present data of this cohort. So how were we tracking the emergence of endogenous control of attention? So one of the tasks that we were using is a switching task that was developed by Kovac and Meller. And it's a very simple task, but I really like it because, oops, sorry. I really like this task because it's very simple. So you have a first block of trials that is, it has a fixation point that is very dynamic and colorful, so the baby looks there. And only when the baby looks at the point, so we are monitoring, only when the baby looks at the point that the trials start. And then this fixation point is followed by a blank screen for a second, and then it's followed by a nice little rabbit that is jumping, is dynamic, for 2 seconds. And we repeat that 9 times. If the baby, during this 9 times, is able to anticipate gaze in the blank screen to where the rabbit is appearing, then we go on to the second block. If not, if they didn't reach the criterion of 3 anticipation, then we give them 9 more trials. And if there is no anticipation, then we stop. But if there are anticipation in these 9 or 18 trials, then we go to the block 2, which is just changing the stimuli to the other location. So these tasks provide different dependent variables. So the number of trials to criterion, so how many trials did the child, the baby, need in order to reach the criterion of 3 anticipations? The percentage of correct anticipation in block 1, okay, we use the percentage because some of the baby got 9, some of the baby got 18 trials. And these variables talk about the efficacy of endogenous attention, right? And the third one is the percentage of perseveration in block 2. So whether the baby keeps looking at the location of the previous stimuli, right? And that talks about the efficacy of attentional flexibility in those babies. So you can see here, okay, so this is how it looks like. This is the baby looking at the stimuli. And you can see here, when you can follow the dot and see how the baby goes and looks to the other location. So if you learn that the stimuli is there, then it takes a little bit of time to learn when the context change and reprogram your behavior in order to anticipate to the other side. So this is what we did. And so here you have the number of trials to criterion for 6 months, 9 months, and 16 to 18 months. So you see that, there is not a significant age effect, but you can see the trend of a reduction here. But here we have an age effect in the correct anticipation in block 1, which are higher at 18 months. And also the percent of perseveration. And this is a nice result, in my opinion, because you have children that are more able to anticipate. So there is a sign that they learn very, very well where the stimuli is presented, but also they are more flexible because they perseverate less when the context changes. And so there is and this is not happening at 9 months where they learn a lot, but they perseverate a lot. So they are not as flexible, switching attention when they learn something. This is something that happen also to patients that have a frontal damage. All right, so this is a nice data that shows the good development of these functions between 9 and 18 years of age. Another thing that we did is to try to predict for example here, the number of trials to criterion in block 1 is related to, this is a regression, hierarchical regression, to predict the number of trials to criterion at age 18. And so we have a contribution that is significant from the pre-session performance, so that tells us about the stability, individual differences in stability of this learning. And then also we have a significant, we were using temperament, the 3 factors, regulation, positive anticipation, and negative affectivity, and also the environment, the ACCS index of the family. And we found that there is a quite significant contribution of the socioeconomic status of the family in order to predict this learning capacity at this age, very early age. Also, when we try to predict the percent of perseveration in block 2, we also found stability. As you see, the previous wave performance is also significantly contributing. And there is also a contribution of temperament, of the self-regulatory capacity informed by the parents. So children that are more regulated, like, for example, they can be, when they are irritated, they soothe better and by themselves. So that contributes to the flexibility of attention measured with this task. All right, another way to measure endogenous attention is with the gap overlap task. I don't know if you know this task, but this is a task in which we have two different conditions. So one condition is, there is a central stimuli that is very appealing, is three-dimensional and is dynamic, it moves a little bit. And so the child is looking at the central stimuli, and then there are two conditions. The central stimuli disappear, and then a peripheral stimuli appears. Or the condition in which the central stimulus does not disappear, and then the peripheral comes out. And now we call this the gap condition because there is a gap between the appearance of the peripheral stimuli and the central one. But the overlap is because of the two stimuli overlapping. And what we measure here is whether the baby disengage, the infant disengage, to look at the peripheral one. Because disengagement of attention, according to the Posner theory of attention, is one of the endogenous mechanisms. So voluntary, if you are looking at something and something else comes out, but you are engaged in this, you need to disengage from that in order to go and check the other stimuli. So the disengagement of attention, and I don't know if you have heard about the fact that very young babies, they have a hard time disengaging from the stimuli, and sometimes they even get irritated because they are engaged there and cannot disengage easily because they don't have this the development of this disengagement, which is controlled in the parietal cortex. Now, what we saw here, this is the overlap and the gap condition. This is the latency of the saccade latency, and this is the disengagement failure. So whether they could not disengage from the central, the number of trials in which they could not disengage from the central stimuli to look at the peripheral one. And so what you see here is that at the age of 16, 18 months, they reduce the disengagement failure. And they also are faster to move, but only in the gap condition, not in the overlap. But the disengagement failure goes down for both the gap and the overlap. But an interesting part here is also the contribution to disengagement failure from, again, the previous session. Here we are predicting disengagement failure at 18 months from the disengagement failure at 9 months. There is a contribution here, and also there is an important contribution of the ACCS to this. So the higher the ACCS of the family, the less failure to disengage show the children. So there is, again, and also here there is also significant the chaos. The chaos is another questionnaire measuring the organization of the home. Okay, so it means that this early development of this endogenous control of attention is very much permeable to the environment, to the home environment. Okay, another thing that we did was to, we collaborate with people in Oxford. Carla Hornbow, she was in Oxford at that time, but now she's in the University of Bristol in the UK. And she was the one developing this very nice task, the Early Childhood Inhibitory Control Task, which is a task that they were applying to infants that were 10 months old or older. And we have 9-month-old, we dare to try whether it was useful also for them. It's challenging because they have to give a response. So you have to give them instruction, and they have to follow the instruction to give a response. And we measure whether they did it right or wrong. And so the task consists of, of course, we train. There are 2 familiarization processes here before we start with the experimental task, which is one is just a butterfly on the screen of the tablet, and then we ask the baby to touch the butterfly. So it's a simple instruction. Can you touch the butterfly? And then we also do it in front of him, and then the baby, after the baby touched the butterfly, it moves slowly, softly in the screen. So they like it. And then after the butterfly, there is one button with a smiley face in the screen. And we ask them, can you touch the button with a smiley face? And then once they touch it, there is a nice feedback coming, right? So when the baby is ready, now is touching the screen, then we present 2 buttons. One button with a smiley face and one button that is empty. If the baby will touch the empty one, nothing happened. Nothing. But if they touch the smiley face one, there is a nice feedback. Okay? But the instruction is always, can you touch the button with a smiley face? And so the manipulation here, the experimental manipulation, is that the button with a smiley face is presented most of the time in one side. You see, 70%, 75% of the trials is in one side, and this is counterbalance. And only 25% of the time it presented in the other side. So we have 3 conditions here. We have the condition in which the prepotent, the target, the bottom, the smiley face button is presented in the prepotent location without switching from the previous one. Like, for example, here. Here, we have the bottom and the button on the prepotent side, but it didn't switch from the previous trial. Then this is 1. And then we have the prepotent location with a switch. For example, if we have an inhibitory trial in the previous trial, and now we have the bottom in the prepotent side, but it comes from a switch. Okay? So contrasting these 2, we have the effect of switching, flexibility. And also looking at how the baby does when the button changes to the non-prepotent side, and it's always following a switch because they are infrequent. This is the effect of inhibitory control. So whether they are able to not to inhibit the prepotent, touching the prepotent side. So you can see here the baby doing that task. So in this case, the prepotent, so the smiley face is on the left side. So you see there is no need, after the baby is doing it, there is no need to even give the instruction. You can see the prepotent behavior there. Now it changed to the other side, and they did it perfect. And now it's back to the prepotent side, and it's a little bit confused. This is a perseveration. It's like, all right. So we did that at 9 months and 16 months. These are already published. You can look at it. And so we have the prepotent non-switch, and they did quite well. You can see that at 9 months, and they were over at 75% of the time. They like it, they start. They do it very well. And also at 16 months, it's almost perfect doing this condition because it's the easiest one. And then this is the prepotent with a switch. And then, of course, they go down, so there is an effect of condition. And the harder is the inhibitory side, right? Where they have a hard time to inhibit it. Like, for example, at 9 months, they were below, here you have the numbers. This is the percentage of accuracy at 9 months and 16 months for inhibitory condition, prepotent non-switch, prepotent switch, okay? So we found an effect of age for the prepotent non-switch and the inhibitory between 9 months and 16 months with this task, which again talks about the development of this function, the important development that is going on in this transition from infancy to toddlerhood. Okay, let's talk a little bit then about the brain. So what we did was to use, here you have a video in which you can see, this is how we register resting state EEG with these babies, I mean with infants, and also in the first 3 waves, we took resting state. So we have 2 minutes of them looking at like was called yesterday inscape, no? Figures, like colors, and a little bit of music that is very calm. So 2 minutes of that, and 2 minutes of experimenter blowing bubbles to the baby. And we compare the 2 restings, and there were differences, so we put the 4 minutes together, right? And we analyzed the resting data, we analyzed in two ways. So the first way was the computation of energy of different oscillatory activity. So you decompose with a fast Fourier transform, decompose and get the energy, so frequency. And there is an important thing is that the curve showing that how is the relationship between the power, the energy of the different frequency, it follows a curve like that, a function like this. So there is what we call the aperiodic activity, over which there is the oscillatory peak in the range of zeta and alpha frequencies, right? So this is a way to analyze the data. And another way is once you have the different frequencies, the signal for alpha, theta, beta, whatever frequency you are interested on, then we can calculate the connectivity using the coherence between the 2 signals over time. And we can calculate whether there is a coherence between every 2 channels. And we were using a high-density EEG acquisition system with 128 channels, right? And we can use this connectivity matrix to calculate things that I'll tell you about later. All right, so as I told you in our sample, so this is a baby carrying the EEG net. So there is this aperiodic activity, and you can characterize this aperiodic activity by calculating the offset. So when the regression is the line start, the function, and also the exponent. So with these 2 measures, you characterize the aperiodic activity. And over that, you can also take out this basal activity and just have the oscillatory power spectrum. And here you have a peak in the theta range and another peak in the alpha range, right, of activity. And then other activities that you can calculate the relative power of this oscillatory activation, right? So as I told you, so in our sample, we characterize age changes in the exponent. So the curve gets flatter with age, and the offset also increase with age. This is interesting. In this paper, we were seeing whether it is important, the aperiodic activity, for the relative power of all the frequencies that is taking a lot of attention in the research about cognition. So you can read about that in that paper. But as I said, it's very interesting that to characterize how the peak changes. So this is in our sample, at this one, 9 months, 16 months, changes in the peak of the alpha range. So the frequency gets a little bit higher. I mean, the peaks gets higher, more amplitude, but also it gets in the frequency at which it is the maximum, is also a little bit higher with age. And so here you have the development of this oscillatory activity without the basal activity. And so the theta activity goes down. The relative power of theta goes down with age, in this age range. And the alpha goes up, and beta, I don't think there was a significant effect in beta, no? But the significant reduction and increase in theta and alpha, respectively, was significant. Now, an important question is, does this activity relates to the performance of the babies in the tasks that I show you? So one is to see the relationship between this brain activity and the performance of the asset. And what we found here is that the peak in theta frequency is associated with accuracy in the prepotent non-switch and the prepotent switch trials. So babies that have a theta frequency peak that is more apparent and is more, it's in a higher frequency, which goes in the direction of maturation, they are the ones showing the best accuracy in this task. And we found also that the accuracy of this task at 16 months is significantly related with oscillatory power in theta and alpha frequencies, right? So that could be considered, so we could consider this activity, brain activity, like a brain marker of the performance of these data, right? Of these tasks. Another thing that I told you that we were looking at in this data is the functional connectivity in alpha frequency. So what we did is to calculate the coherence in every two channels. So this is it's a little bit different of how it's made with fMRI, but it can be made with EEG also. And so what we do is to have every node is a channel in EEG, and then we put an edge between any two once they are above a threshold in the coherence of the two channels. Our threshold was 0.25. And with that, you can calculate also something using graph theory. You can calculate the path length, which is the minimum number of edges between any two nodes. So for example, if you want to calculate the length, the path length between node I and J, right? You could see that there is not a direct connection between these two nodes, so the connection happens through intervening nodes. But how many is the question? So you can, here you could go in this way. So following the blue line, and you can find that there is a connection, ultimate connection through a path. But what we want to find is the shortest possible path between any two nodes, any two pair. And so in this case, it will be 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 is the shortest possible between these two. And so this is what we call path length, what is called path length in graph theory. And we use this to calculate the global efficiency of the net, of the circuitry, right? Because the global efficiency is the inverse of the average path length of the network. So we have the path length calculated for any two pairs nodes. We have the average of that number, and then multiply by -1, and then global efficiency is whether the net, whether the connectivity is organized through shortest path, very short, or no, or longer. So we get a number that tells us about the efficiency of information sharing in this net, right? And also we can calculate clustering, for example, the number of local triangular connections, like these ones, or these ones, or these ones, right? Local, in order to see whether the network follows what is called the small world topology, which is the topology that we know the human brain has, which is modular. So we know that the brain is very well locally connected in some modules that are connected to other modules through intermodular connections. And also we know that in the human brain there are what is called hubs, which are nodes, regions that are very central to the exchange of information or the control of information. And actually, the anterior cingulate cortex, for example, is one main hub, connector hub in the brain, which makes sense, because if it's an important node for attention control, for the executive control of attention or executive attention, it's very important to be connected to very many modules, right? Okay, so it could be 2 modules. So what we did that in our data, and this is how it looks like. So we have a huge, important cluster here in frontal and parietal in all the ages. So here we include also the 36 months so far. But here you can see the trajectory of the different measures. So clustering, local efficiency, which is the same context, but the same concept of global efficiency, but just within very local triangular connections. And this is the global efficiency. So you see, and then this is the small world propensity. And the small world propensity was quite high from the beginning and doesn't change with age, in this age range. But this is very interesting that we found that the global efficiency of the network, how the information is transferred through more direct pathways, is increasing quite a bit between 6 months and 16 months, and then no further changes so far in our data, although we expect it to change with respect to adulthood. Okay, so is this related with the tasks, performance of the tasks? The answer is yes. So we found that the trial, the criterion, the number of trials to reach the criterion for anticipation, so how fast the children learn about the regularity of the contest and can use attention to anticipate there, is related to local efficiency, clustering, and global efficiency. So children that learn faster, so they reach the criterion faster, are the ones that have a larger global efficiency in the network, right? Also, the acid, we found a correlation between the global efficiency in alpha, right, and the propagand switch accuracy. So actually, the one in which the baby in the video made an error, so to illustrate that is a difficult thing for them. So children that did better there are the ones that have a larger or higher global efficiency in the alpha frequency, which is a very important frequency for attention, right? Also the local frequency, but the effect is more significant with the global efficiency. Also, there is a longitudinal prediction here, so because the global efficiency in alpha at 9 months is also predictive of the prepotent switch accuracy at 16 months in these babies. Okay, right. So, and one more thing is that this is a different cohort, but also this is a cohort in which we were following them up to to 5 years of age. And in this case, we were measuring at 5 years inhibitory control with a very simple task. It's a go, no go, in which they have to respond to the traffic light in green, but not to respond to the one in red. And of course, this is less frequent because there is a tendency to answer. And with this, we can measure the N2 that we know is very much associated to the detection of a signal that is important for what you are doing, for your goal. So the detection of the red light elicits a larger N2 in the ERP. And the P3, which has been very much related to the response inhibition. And of course, it has a larger amplitude for the no-go compared to the go, right? And so we measure brain basis of inhibitory control with these two, N2 and P3. But we were able to track whether the percentage of perseveration in the shifting tasks in this kid is or not related to the performance of these inhibitory control task. And in this sample, we were measuring the shifting tasks. This, as I said, it is a different cohort. It was a cohort that we were studying before we started this longitudinal study that I showed you. And in this one, we found, we also did a reverse categorization task at the year 2 years. And we found that the children that have a larger number of perseveration also have more errors, so less correct responses in the reverse categorization task. And then this is also related to both behavioral markers of the inhibitory control task at age 5 and also the neural markers. So that is just to show you that this early attention control is important, contribute to the development of executive control later on. Okay, so we have come to the conclusion. So here, just to conclude, just to say that, we have shown that there is an important development of the endogenous attention control in the transition from infancy to toddlerhood. And the development of endogenous control is permeable to the caregiving environment from very early on. So we found that contribution of socioeconomic status of the family. Of course, we have a lot of data there. We have parenting style. We have mental health in the mom. We have, for example, we have a different, but we still need to analyze all this data in order to figure out what aspect of the home environment is the more important here. You know that ACCS is a measure that put together the educational level of the parents, both mom and dad, and also the salary, so the income in the family, which is corrected by the demography of the house, so it's divided by the number of members in the house, and also put in relation to the poverty threshold of the country. So this is the index that we were using, but of course it's a quite broad index. Okay, so executive control shows an important development between 9 and 18 months of age. We saw the relationship between that and task. And also the early development of endogenous attention is foundational to the development of executive control and self-regulation. The oscillatory brain activity in alpha frequency shows a significant development in the first years of life and is associated to the maturation of endogenous control of attention. And efficient functional connectivity in theta and alpha frequency can be a brain marker of this early development of attention. And of course, we can use all this information to both understand pathology, and also we can use this information to design interventions and use this information in order to see whether our intervention is going the right direction or not. A more general conclusion is how we should do cognitive neuroscience research. So we go from theory, it's very important, to research and back to theory after research. So cognitive theory is to guide neuroscience research in designing meaningful experimental protocol. So it's very important to have a theory before you go to look at the brain. And so data from multiple levels of analysis lead to better theories. But of course, when you have new imaging technology and methods of analysis, there is a bulk of new data, and you need to integrate this new data with the theoretical models and re-elaborate your theory if needed in order to accommodate the new data. So the cognitive neuroscience approach provides a very useful framework for understanding developmental disorders and also the design of intervention, as I already said. So this is it. So this is my funding, and this is my lab, the people that, of course, I have to be very grateful for them because, as you can imagine, doing all this research with babies takes a committed group of, a team of researchers. So I'm very grateful to them. And I thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Very, very scintillating and gripping talk. I think it had all our attention all the time. We have time for a few questions. I thought the students would be jumping up. Over to Bapi.
Yeah, thank you. Wonderful talk. One question I have in the graph theoretic analysis, I see there are 18 nodes that you have chosen to do, or is it just representative?
No, it was a representation.
Okay.
We were using the whole.
Right.
I mean, I think we were
every pair.
We were taking out the peripheral leads because they are very noisy.
Right.
The peripheral, but we were taking maybe 118 or something like. I don't remember the exact number.
118 all pairs.
So all pairs,
okay.
yeah. So you.
Right. Okay. Right.
Yeah,
Thank
you
you.
can
Yeah.
see. Here. I like this. Oops. You can see here, yeah, all these nodes were included. See, all these nodes.
Yeah, so I was curious if you noticed, you also talked about hubs and modules, and of course you didn't have time to comment on that, but do you see any integration or differentiation that is emerging during this developmental course?
Well, we were expecting to see age trend here in the small world propensity. We were expecting to see more of a segregation and more of an integration. But we saw a little bit of more integration with the global efficiency measure. And also, you see the increase in clustering suggests also not the segregation, but also the increase in the connectivity in the local. But what I think is that here, what you see is two main clusters. So we are not seeing yet much of a differentiation of different clusters in the frontal. It's true that it's EEG. So it's you can see the flow of information from the posterior part of the brain to the frontal part of the brain, but not much of what is behind there. So it's two main clusters. So it's hard to see, as you do in fMRI, more of a spatial differentiation. But again, this is I think it's very useful to look at both techniques because this is very precise in the time domain, very precise. But it's not so precise in the spatial domain. So that's why we see two main things, two main modules, the frontal and the parietal. And then this global efficiency is talking about how efficient, how direct, if you may, is the flow of information between posterior and anterior areas, right? But
so this functional development assumes there is a structural development that is supporting indirectly.
Absolutely.
But are there any ways of measuring how the brain is developing from at this age?
Yeah, there are different labs now around the world, and we also are doing this, doing fMRI with very young babies, with infants. And it's hard, but it's doable. And so there is information there on the, you can do DTI to see the development of the white matter tracks. And so one thing that is very nice, would be very nice to do, is to use both techniques and see what is the association between this global efficiency measure or local efficiency measure with EEG at the same time that you measure, same time or, I don't know, it's complicated to do MRI with an infant. So do MRI and EEG at the same time with an infant would be very complicated, but it's doable. You can do that. But even if you do separately in 2 different sessions, you can measure DTI, so the integrity of white matter fibers, and see whether this integrity is associated with this efficiency that you measure with the EEG. That would be very nice to know. And I mean, there are more and more labs being able to scan babies, particularly below 9 months of age. I mean, between 9 months and 3 years, I think it's very difficult. It's a challenge because they have to be very still. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? Yes.
Just one question here, ma'am.
Sorry. One there. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, amazing talk. It was so fun.
Thank you.
So one question that I had was regarding the theta drift that you saw in some infants, at least that's what I understood. The theta frequency drift. Was it in some way correlated with how the child was trained by their mums or whatever? You know, is there any such thing that is, intrinsically different about the children themselves, either by trait or by training? Were those some of those children whose drift was more, were they trained more? Is there any such thing?
Well,
I mean, did you look at that?
Here you see the theta peak and the alpha. It's true that the alpha one is more evident, although we saw the relationship between the theta peak frequency in which the frequency appears in relation with the performance of this task. But you can see that there is a good variability, right? So the peak either, like this baby, shows the peak at 2.5 Hertz, or these babies show the peak at 4.5. So there is a huge range of variability that is very important. Like here in alpha peak, you see the variability is very wide. And there have been reports, like out of my mind, there have been reports showing that this, not the peak of theta, I don't think there is anyone looking at the peak of theta. Hopefully we will look at the peak of theta and alpha now. But the power, relative power of theta in relation to ACCS, for example, or different caregivers' styles, there are some papers showing a relationship. So these measures, these brain measures, are very susceptible to the growing environment, definitely. We still need to characterize more. As I said, ACCS is a very broad variable. So we need to disentangle what is there. What is the important thing? There are very beautiful studies now looking at synchronization, like social synchronization between the mom and the baby from the beginning. And it's very nice to see how the brain signals even synchronize, like in an hyper-scanning between the mom and the baby. So probably that, like paying attention, be sensitive, I don't know. There are so many things in the mom-baby relation, the caregiver relationship with the baby that influences the way the brain works.
So last question.
Thank you, Mom, for your talk. I would extend on the topic of SES and how does it affect very early in infancy. So would you like to make a comment on why SES plays a very significant role? Because we have seen SES playing a very significant role in cognitive control mechanisms in later years, starting from 5 to 11 years of age. But now that I've seen in your studies that it has been playing a very significant role starting from infancy, starting from 6 months of age. So how do you think, what could be the mechanism why SES is playing very significant role in this?
Your question is very important, very interesting. But I'm afraid that I don't have the answer based on the research. I have an insight so I can share my insight. My insight is that there are two main things. Like looking at the literature, there are two main aspects of the caregiven environment that are very influential to the development of the brain. One is the security in the affect. The baby needs to be in an environment where it's secure and is loved. And that is that the caregivers are responsible to the baby, and the baby is calm. It knows that it's safe. It's a safe environment where nothing is going to happen. So there is no stress, there is no anxiety. So if you look at, you can think of how a low SES family that struggles, that has a house, for example, that doesn't have, I don't know, like air conditioning in a place where it's very hot, or doesn't have warm, it's not warm in a place where it's very cold. And so when the environment is not secure, it's not safe, then there is a whole lot of responses in the organism and, of course, in the brain. So that's one important thing. The other important thing is the stimulation, the cognitive stimulation. So how much you stimulate your baby. And here there has been a lot of studies in the last year showing the importance of turn-taking, conversational turn-taking, for example, for the social domain, for the language domain, and even for the attention domain. So talking to an infant is very important. And talking, and also, I mean, showing things like, to me it's very sad, really very sad, to see a young infant in front of a tablet. Like in the car, we're driving to somewhere, and the car, there is a tablet, and the baby's there, like that. It's not looking at the window, it's not looking at the environment, it's not, so the baby has to be stimulated in the visual domain, in the attention domain, auditory domain, the language domain, in all the domains. So the stimulation and the emotional and affective safety, in my opinion, are the two main things.
Thank you very much. Please join me in thanking Barbara once again.
Thank you, Charu ma'am, for such a great talk. Please accept a small memento from our side. I request Professor Nandini to do the honors. So with such an interesting talk, we move into our first oral session of the day, and it is on cognitive development. And I request and invite Professor Rashmi Gupta, IIT Bombay, to chair the session. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So now we have oral session 3, and the title of this session is Cognitive Development, and which is a very nice extension of the previous keynote talk. So the first speaker is Tripti Verma. She is from CBCS, and the title of her talk is Feedback and Reward Facilitate Shifts Between Cognitive Control Modes in Children. So Tripti, you have 15 minutes to present.
Good morning, everyone. I'll be talking about how feedback and reward facilitate shifts between cognitive control modes in children. So I'll begin with talking about what is cognitive control. So cognitive control can be defined as the flexible regulation of behavior in accordance with people's internal goals. So Brewer talked about the dual mechanism of control framework, where he proposed two modes of cognitive control. One is proactive control and the other is reactive control. So in a common language, for example, in a classroom setting, if a teacher says that, okay, in a minute, I'll give you a math problem to solve. So a child who is more using proactive control mode would start preparing his pencils, would clean up his desk, and start revising what kind of problems he has already solved, and he will start practicing on his own. While if a child uses reactive control mode, what he'll do is he'll wait for the instructions up till the minute the teacher gives actual question, and then he will begin, once the question arrives, he will start thinking about the question there itself. So we can say that proactive control works on anticipation and prevention of interference, while reactive control is the detection and resolution of interference. One is an early selection mechanism and the other is a late correction mechanism. So I'll talk about how flexible shifts in cognitive control mode emerges developmentally. So mostly 5-year-olds are more inclined towards reactive control mode. They can use proactive strategies, but they struggle when they have to flexibly shift between the two control modes. Whereas, on the other hand, older children, in the case of older children, proactive control stabilizes. They they can maintain task rules, they can anticipate challenges, and rely more on proactive control mode. Flexible development of control modes emerges at the age of 6 to 8 years. So children begin to integrate both control modes, proactive and reactive control mode, and they make use of the control modes depending on the demands of the task. So that leads us to the question, how do motivational factors like feedback and reward shape children's cognitive control mode? So in prior work, we have found that both feedback and reward improves proactive control, and these both motivational factors have been implemented in educational context, even in regular daily life context. So we still do not know how do these motivational factors affect flexible control and not just the proactive control, and what are the mechanisms behind these effects, and do we have any motivational factor that is more beneficial than the other. So the objective of the current study is to investigate the effect of feedback and reward motivation in flexible cognitive control. We have 50 participants recruited from schools of Prayagraj, divided into two age groups, 6 to 8-year-olds and 9 to 11-year-olds. So we hypothesize that both feedback and reward will enhance performance. The effect of motivational factors would be more in a flexible control condition compared to a proactive only condition. And we expect to find more significant positive impact of reward on performance compared to feedback. So the key factors here is the age group, 6 to 8 and 9 to 11 years. Condition, one is a flexible control condition, that is the proactive possible condition, and the other is a proactive encouraged condition. I'll talk about this a bit later. The blocks, we have 3 blocks, baseline block, feedback block, and a reward block, all commenced in different sessions with the participants, and the trial switch and repeat. So we used linear and generalized mixed model to analyze our results. So I'll explain briefly about the task. It is a cued switching task, color shape switch task. So first I'll explain what are the two conditions in the experiment. The first is a proactive possible condition and the second is a proactive encouraged condition. These conditions are manipulated on the basis of cue to target interval. So in the proactive possible condition, which is more of a flexible control condition, we present the cue beforehand and it stays when the target appears. So the participant has the option to use either of the control mode. He can choose to be prepared beforehand and use proactive control mode, or he can choose to use reactive control mode, that is decide only when the target appears. In the proactive encouraged condition, on the other hand, the cue appears and then disappears and then the target appears. So the participant only has the option to use the proactive control mode in this case. So the trial structure begins with a fixation cross and then the cue appears. So the cue can either be colorful patches, which will indicate that the child has to select, to respond on the target based on the color of the target. And the other is a gray colored patches. In this case, the child has to respond to the shape of the target. So baseline block will neither have a feedback or reward, but then there will be feedback block and a reward block. In the feedback block, if the participant answers correctly, he will see a happy snowman face, and if he answers incorrectly, he will see a sad snowman face on each trial. While in the reward block, the reward is contingent after every 10th trial. So if in the previous 10 trials he has answered correctly on at least 60% of the trials, then only he'll get a candy. Picture of a candy will be shown to him. And in the next few trials, if the participant again exceeds 60%, then he'll get 2 candies, and this will go on. If he or she does not reach the 60%, the number of candies remains the same. So I'll talk about the results now. So overall, we found that both feedback and reward significantly benefited the performance of children in case of reaction time as well as in case of accuracy. So we found that both feedback and reward improved performance, but reward emerged as a stronger motivational factor. If we look at the developmental effects, first we'll begin with 6 to 8 year olds. We found that feedback benefited only in the proactive possible condition, that is the flexible control condition, and it had a mild and inconsistent benefit, but it did not, there was no significant benefit in the proactive only condition. On the other hand, reward benefited both conditions, proactive possible as well as proactive encouraged conditions. So we can say that feedback provides only mild and inconsistent support for flexible control, while reward reliably enhances performance across both flexible control and proactive control conditions. On the other hand, in case of 9 to 11 year olds, we saw that feedback has a minimal benefit in the proactive possible condition, but in the proactive encouraged condition, it had a very detrimental effect. It significantly slowed down the reaction time of the 9 to 11 year olds. On the other hand, in case of reward, reward significantly benefited both conditions, flexible control and proactive control, but the stronger impact was on the flexible control condition. Similar results were found in the switch cost analysis. We found that both feedback and reward significantly reduced switch cost, with reward offering the stronger improvement. And we also saw that 6 to 8 year olds were the ones who benefited mainly in the flexible control condition, while 9 to 11 year olds showed consistent gains across both conditions, flexible control as well as proactive control. So we'll begin the discussion talking about few main key points. So the first point is, why do we see feedback and reward facilitate flexible shifts in cognitive control? Feedback acts as an external reminder of the goal or rule. It lowers the working memory load. It supports the goal maintenance demands. It also gives us information about when a shift is needed so that the participant is prepared beforehand. And it also improves accuracy and speed, especially in younger children whose cognitive control is still developing. On the other hand, reward increases the attentional investment of the participant, and it speeds up the responses so that the child is more towards obtaining maximum reward in this case. It reduces the switch cost and increases voluntary switching, enhancing the flexibility. It encourages children to be more faster. They willingly switch between task sets whenever the task demands. That is increasing the flexibility in this case. Another point of discussion is, why do we find that reward is stronger than feedback? So feedback gives information about the performance, but it does not necessarily tell us how effort worthy the task is. So reward also ties the performance to desirable outcomes, tangible outcomes. It increases the subjective value of the performing well. It encourages the child to use more cognitive resources. Rewards which are in the form of points, tokens, or praise, it creates a motivational boost for the participant, and it directly enhances the cognitive control engagement in this case. Another point of discussion is that we found stronger effects of both motivational factors in the flexible control condition. So in a flexible control condition, in this case the proactive possible condition, so when a task allows switching rules, trying alternatives and adjusting strategies, such as in this case, the children have room to respond. They can flexibly shift between the two modes of control, they can optimize their speed, they can improve their accuracy and effort. So the effects, the motivation from the feedback and reward, it translates into better performance. However, in the demanding task, like a proactive only task, the cognitive load is already high. It forces the participants to use a single mode of strategy, that is to be prepared beforehand, constraining their responses and then resulting into having a weaker or significantly no effect on the performance, even with feedback or reward. So we also saw that there was a detrimental effect of feedback in older children in case of proactive only condition, that was the proactive encouraged condition. So we have seen in previous literature that older children are more inclined towards proactive control. Their proactive control have already stabilized. We have seen that they have a similar effect on both feedback and reward in their proactive possible as well as proactive encouraged condition. So their sensitivity to this proactive reactive conflict is greater compared to the younger ones. So in the proactive encouraged condition, when they are given feedback, they face a conflict. One, they have to maintain the proactive cue-based strategy, and two, they have to maintain the reactive trial-by-trial feedback. This creates a conflict for them and increases their working memory load, significantly slowing down their performance. So, conclusion can be, we have seen that both feedback and reward, it improves cognitive control performance in children. Reward consistently producing stronger effects, particularly in the case of flexible control. And younger and older children both benefit from feedback and reward, but their benefit differs depending on the demands of the task. Overall, motivation plays a crucial role in shaping flexible shifts between cognitive control modes across development. Thank you.
Thanks, Tripti. Any questions?
Hi, Tripti. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. I have a clarificatory question probably. So you were giving the feedback in every trial and
Yes.
the reward came in every 10 trial,
Yes.
right? So what do you, so this is the general trend in this kind of task that you actually put it like this, or?
So what we have seen in previous literature is either they have used only feedback or they have used only reward. So there was no separating the effects of two. So in this case, what we tried to do is feedback, since it was given on each and every trial, we tried to separate the effects of feedback and reward, and that is why we thought of giving a performance contingent reward depending on how in each trial they modulate their own performance, and every 10, if they receive reward on every 10th trial, that increases their engagement, and in future trials they have increased lower down their accuracy in the upcoming trials.
No, I understand that. What I mean to say is, could this be blocked as well, and then the effects could be different? Like probably you are providing feedback in every trial, and then there's a different, per trial you are also going for reward in a different set of blocks.
So we thought of that, but analysis-wise, it was very difficult to then like separate the effects of then feedback. We would not know, okay, on which trial we saw the effect of feedback and on which trial we saw the effect of reward. So it would be very difficult to like separate them.
Yeah, that was a very beautiful design, I think. My
Thank you,
question
ma'am.
is, because the design is so interesting, that you have the baseline for the due ages.
Yes.
So I want you to go back to the graph with the results, because I want to see whether the effect of feedback or motivation overcomes the effect of age. So if you compare the baseline in the 9, 10, no. So you make them more similar. See,
Yes.
that with
Right.
reward, the 6 to 8 years old, they become more similar. But I wanted to see whether it's still, there is an effect of development. But this is it's very interesting how you, because it can be used to teach them, to teach.
Right. So the further
children.
implications would be in the similar line that educators can use this in their classroom settings. Even the parents can use it when they are teaching their child in their home, or when they are teaching them something separate other than like educational context.
Yeah, so you can tell them, well, use metacognitive, like to let them understand that if they have, because this is an external motivator.
Yes.
But if it can become internal, the motivation can become internal, they will do better.
Right.
So it's a very nice
Right.
way to see how to use reward and feedback. Yeah,
Right.
very nice design.
Thank you, ma'am.
So one clarification. So you have
Yes.
3 types of blocks. I'm assuming baseline always is the first one.
No, sir. We have counterbalanced all 3 blocks. So these 3 blocks were done on separate sessions. So these sessions were divided into days. So mostly first day, for example, baseline, feedback, then reward. Then we have counterbalanced with each participant.
Okay, that's good. So the other question is following up on that. In the feedback block, so they do get the positive versus negative feedback.
Right.
So would that play a role on the subsequent trials? Because that's absent in the reward feedback, because the feedback was only given after 10 trials. And it's only positive reward or no reward in that sense. You don't have a negative valence of the feedback in the reward condition.
True, true.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Tripti.
Thank you so much.
Now I invite the next speaker, Kundal Kohli. He's also from CBCS, and the title of his talk is Investigating the Relationship Between Meta-Control and Creative Thinking in Children. Kundal, you also have 15 minutes. Yeah?
Good morning, everyone. I am Kundal. So I am presenting it was my thesis work. So from my lab. So on the investigating the relationship between meta control and creative thinking in children. So before the start, I just want to imagine you on the stranded island, in an unexplored island. So you have 2 choices. First, you can explore, you can search the resources. It needs cognitive flexibility, which requires your openness, your everything. Then there's other thing which you need is persistence, which suppose you took a task, then you have to complete with a goal. That's a persistent state. So your success doesn't depend on not only you have either of the trait, persistence or flexibility, but a switch between them. That's the ability is meta control. How you can better switch between these states, and this depends on your success of the survival. So the literature suggested that creative thinking involves dynamic variation of cognitive control, which largely relies on the meta control ability. So how we study creative thinking? So for that, we have 2 core components: divergent thinking, which generates different solution to open-ended problems. It requires cognitive flexibility. And other is convergent thinking, which requires persistence and focus, as we saw in the example. To understand this meta control, Hormel in 2015 proposed a model, meta control state model, in which a meta control operates along a continuum between persistence and flexibility. Extreme persistence, which is strong top-down bias, and weak competition between the alternatives. High competition between alternatives. With extreme flexibility, it requires weak top-down bias and weak competition between the alternatives. So extreme persistence supports convergent thinking. Extreme flexibility supports divergent thinking. So in adults, this studies, like there are proper studies where a high meta-control ability have a better divergent convergent performance. But in children, this relationship, this evidence were lacking. So there's also a study like by Gupta and Kerr, where investigating the relationship has implication for understanding the benefits of meta-control for creative thinking, given the rapid maturation of cognitive control. Also, when, by investigating this relationship, it has significant educational implications. So to study this relationship, we tested two hypotheses. First, given the slow maturation of meta-control, we expect lower performance on meta-control tasks in children as compared to adults. In the for the second hypothesis, meta-control adaptability will predict both forms of creative thinking, as we have seen in adults, divergent thinking and convergent thinking. And children will exhibit lower adaptability than adults. This will reflect our metacognitive development. So for this study, we recruited 52 participants in two groups, 26 children from a local school in Allahabad and 26 adults from the university. We we have used control measures as a digit span for working memory and socio-economic scale of Kupusomi's SES scale. So with the procedure, first we have, it's a meta-control task. They did a meta-control task in which they are given a familiarization session. After that, they did a main session, and in the end, task and performance monitoring questionnaire, which was self-reporting. After that, they did a divergent thinking task. So it's an alternative task, then a convergent thinking task. For the meta-control task, this was adopted from a O'Leary and Slotsky 2017 numerical discrimination task, in which the main metric to see the meta-control was adaptability score. So, as the name suggests, their main goal was to discriminate between the quantities of dot, which box has more number of dots. So, in the start, they have to choose one of the game, a red game or a blue game to children, which suggests their difficulty, which was not earlier instructed to them. They will understand later by experience, by playing the game. Then, for the creativity task, for divergent thinking, we use alternative task that they generated novel uses for 6 different common objects. And we used 2 measures, originality and fluency scores, and their rating was based on Biatel 2021. For the convergent thinking, we use intelligence test, because in the literature, Jarsfeld et al., he also suggested that intelligence test can be a good measure to see the convergent thinking. So for that, in a verbal measure, we took similarities and vocabulary subsets of Wishler's, and for non-verbal measure, we took Revin's progressive matrices, SPM, CPM. So we'll start with the meta control. So for that task, how we calculated the adaptability score. That was the metric for meta control. So for adaptability score, we took the performance ratio of easy and hard trials and subtracted them. So this gave us how they are performing in a better way on easy trial as compared to hard trials. That was their adaptability score. So adults perform really good, with much better than children. As we can see, we saw very large effects. Now, then to see the further effects, we did a 2x2 design to compare the children and adults on performance ratio. So we saw adults were optimizers. They consistently chose the easy trial, while children were explorers. Was for 53%, like by chance. So why it was happening? Like why children were not optimizing? For that, we can see the data of monitoring tasks, like what monitoring data that we got in from the self-report. So for that, adults monitored much better than children. Children were only 38% correctly observed that which task was easier. For their performance, adults underestimated their performance while children overestimated. This was due to because adults were very sensitive to their predictive errors. So they can have a, while children overestimated it. Due to their error sensitivity, adults can have they can better control it, not can monitor it. With overestimation, children can't rely on their strategy. So they thought they are doing well, so they didn't change the strategy. So which strategy should they use? Then for creative performance, adults performed all three creative tasks very outperformed children. So what's the reason for this? Is there over meta control for the creative performance? So understand this, we did a regression. We did 4 independent linear regression models to understand this. So meta control adaptability predicted performance on convergent thinking as well as divergent thinking, with 31% predicted for similarities in convergent thinking and for 11% divergent thinking. That was really interesting thing to see. Because efficient meta control allows flexible allocation of cognitive effort, enhancing both idea generation, which is flexibility, and problem solving, which is persistence. So how we can frame this as a discussion? So even children who monitored correctly, 38%, did not optimize. So what was the reason? So utilization deficiency. Children can generate the strategy but fail to implement it effectively. Also, they prioritize exploration over exploitation or efficiency. So this can explain first hypothesis that children suggest lower performance levels on children as compared to adults on meta-control tasks, as there was slow maturation during this age, as we hypothesized. Also, there is an optimism bias, which is a barrier to the meta-control. In children, there is a lack of error sensitivity, so they have not have good triggers or no trigger for adjacent control state, which result to underestimation drives adaptive correction. So 6 to 8 years was the exploratory phase. Children prioritize curiosity and information seeking. In this stage, meta control is immature. Monitoring really informs the action. So this is the main finding. As it also supports the meta-control state model, the evidence in children, as meta-control is a scaffold for creativity. So in high meta-control, as according to model, there is efficient resource allocation, sustained effort for complex problem, as we seen in adults. With low meta-control, indiscriminate effort, resource depletion, and lower originality, as we can see in children. So this leads to developmental constraint. Children indiscriminate efforts leads to resource depletion, constraining their creative potential. So adults can manage between the persistence and flexibility state very effectively as compared to children. And this will mature by age as they go through adolescence and changes to adults as well. So the conclusion, the study showed that lower performance levels is in children is due to their slow maturation and of metacognition in children. Also, this study demonstrated evidence for metacontrol state model in children. Also, we are exploring also how this relationship is going through in the adolescence and also in 9 to 11 years old, as this is the critical developmental window. Thank you. Like, any questions?
Any question?
Hi. Yeah, so here.
Yeah, yes.
Yes. How many divergent uses did people typically do? And how long they took for every instance?
Pardon, sir, can you repeat the second part of the question?
How much time, like when you say, okay, give me a divergent use of so and so, in how much time, how many they are able to generate?
Okay, so we took adults were given 2 minutes to for each object. They are just have given a paper to write as many uses they can in the 2 minutes. So on an average, it was 8 uses they can write, out of which originality was relative. So it was like that, and 2 minutes were given. So sorry. For children, we took 4 minutes because we have to scaffold them, we have to engage them because of 5-6-year-old. So 4 minutes per object average was there. 24 minutes overall for the 6 objects. Yeah.
So, I must admit I'm a little surprised. I would have expected anecdotally children to be more creative than adults. Okay?
Yeah.
And so I'm curious to see whether you can share some examples of what were the novel findings that children versus adults reported, and if the measurement of creativity in terms of rather than sort of writing uses, which could sort of be limited by vocabulary between, I mean, you would expect an adult to have a much larger vocabulary than a 9 to 11-year-old. If you use something else, you think the results could be different?
More diverse. Yeah. So TTCT can be a tolerant test for creative thinking. It's a famous tolerant test for creativity. That's a very useful thing we can have. But for understanding divergent and convergent, this task can better show the thing and answer our question. Because in TTCT, you can't divide which is convergent, what is divergent effectively. And
can you give some examples of what the children versus adults reported in terms of novelty or novel uses in divergent?
So the first thing was we have to, with examples of novelty, adults surely can do that, but with children we have to scaffold, we have to give them some cue, because they can't explain in more novel, they can't go in between different subjects, different topics of novelties. So you have seen this, because this is studies based on a study where they did a divergent thinking task in children, where they interacted while doing the task. They gave instructions to children. So we have to
help them along, kind of thing.
Help them along while giving the task, because they just think in the one. We have to give them some cue to give some different context as well, and keep them interacting as well. Because if they can't, they will just keep silent and they will not answer. So while interacting, by asking questions, how we can use this and this thing, because they can't switch between the contexts very easily as compared to adults. Adults can think of different things at once. So this was a very novel thing which I observed while interacting now.
I'm glad you have that positive feeling about adults. I'm afraid I still don't have that, okay? I think I just find adults extremely boring as compared to children. No offense meant to anybody.
Yeah, true.
But
that's true.
I think if you gave, a free play task, like over an hour to both adults and children, you might see more novelty.
Yeah, that's true.
Do you think the time restriction could be a challenge?
That's true. That's true. Especially for the 5 to 6 years old, because after there's a 4th class dip thing. After 4th class, we are more into convergent. We are more into, more our coordinate control developed to time. So probably novelty can be better in this if we have 1 hour or something. That's.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more question? Yeah. So last question, please.
Hi. Thank you for a very interesting
talk. So I was just wondering if, you can also conceptualize this basis the Piagetian model. So the age group that you took falls within the concrete operational stage as well for children, which is known for more of logical thinking, right? Like it's more what is evident, what is seen. So do you think that that also has a role to play in creativity? And because after that, the next phase becomes the formal operational stage which you have also written that is your future study, what you plan to do ahead. So I think that it might be interesting to see whether that is the phase where, metacognitive abilities are developed, or let's say creativity as a fundamental construct is more evident as children age. So do you think that this model can also sort of help you categorize your findings?
Yeah, we can see that between the groups differences and use this model to understand that, and we can use that in our further studies. That will be helpful, and it can show like this is showing in this stage, and I'm collecting we are doing study, and similar results are coming in that also in that age group, and we can see the differences, and this model can explain. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, let's conclude the session, and let's thank both the speakers for wonderful insight.
Thank you, everyone.
And finishing the session on time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank
now
you.
we have coffee break for half an hour or for 15 minutes, okay. For 15 minutes, we have coffee break. Please come back at 11:15 sharp. Thank you.
So basically this is interactive one and this is not interactive.
Okay. This is what the first presentation.
हाँ जी सर. This one you.
हाँ इसकी जगह हाँ.
ठीक है.
स्लाइड्स चेंज करनी होगी तो यहाँ से करनी होगी.
आप यहाँ से भी इससे भी कर सकते हो, इससे भी कर सकते हो, एंड इससे भी कर सकते हो.
ओह ठीक है. pointer है?
Yeah, इसमें pointer है.
Okay, ठीक है. And mic. Okay, of course I can adjust. Right. थोड़ा सा नीचे यहाँ. Thank you very much.
ठीक है.
कल की सारी हो गई है?
कल की सारी अभी लंच के बाद बैठते हैं. क्योंकि वो which one? Okay. Okay. Okay, so like you want to present your PPT thing, no?
PPT नहीं चाहिए.
आपको PDF चाहिए.
PDF चलेगा because मेरा कुछ ट्रांजिशन मैंने नहीं किया.
Okay.
PPT चलेगा. PDF चलेगा ना?
हाँ, PDF चलेगा, but PPT will like.
These are the oral session. It's not you. It's not for you. Lunch के बाद.
Is Lal Chandama from IIT Delhi here? Okay. Indrajit? Okay. Chehek Sanduja? Okay. Ishita Singh? Okay. Okay.
Should I start? Should we start? Oh, she's going to do an announcement then. I'll wait for her. It's nice, that clock. I'll just follow that clock.
So now we'll start with the fourth oral session on inhibition, and I invite Professor Chandan Vaidya from Georgetown University to chair the session. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, hi everyone. Welcome back. So let's get ready for another stimulating session. This one is on inhibition, and I invite Lal Chandama to please come up. And the title of the talk is Stop or Not. Oops. Do we have conscious access to the decision to stop from IIT Delhi? So you have 15 minutes and 5 minutes of questions.
Okay, I'm Lal Chandama, I'm from IIT Delhi, and today I'll be talking on the topic, stop or not, do we have conscious access to the decision to stop? And this is the outline. Firstly, I'll go into the introduction, then study design, analysis and predictions, conclusions, and the limitations of the study. And let's proceed ahead, the experience of voluntary actions. We are constantly making and stopping actions in our daily lives. For example, while crossing a street. And most voluntary actions are phenomenologically thin, as experience associated with these actions are not vivid, meaning that we are so well adapted to the movements, actions that we used to make in our daily lives that they almost felt effortless and automatic. So the question which arises here is, how consciously aware are we of the decisions underlying these actions? And in order to answer these questions, Live Bet in 1983 asked participants to make voluntary responses and ask them to report the time when they decide to make the response. Although I'll not go into every specific detail of that particular experiment, but this is what Allahabad did. And participants reported being aware of their decision to make a response around 200 milliseconds prior to the actual response. And here for us, what we are asking is whether we tested whether if people can report the time when they decide to stop an action. And this addresses questions about our sense of agency and has implications for brain-computer interfaces, prosthetic, etc. And yeah, let's move on to the study design. In the experimental task, participants perform modified anticipatory response inhibition task. Here, as you can see from the figure, they monitor this feeling bar and respond when the bar reach a target line. The trial usually starts with a fixation of 500 milliseconds, then the bar on either the left side or the right side is being filled up slowly, and participants will need to press either the letter, the keyboard button Z for the left side of the bar and M for the right side of the bar when this filling reaches exactly the horizontal target line. And in a random 25% of trials, a tone, which is a stop signal, was presented, and in these trials, participants were instructed to stop their response. That is, they were requested not to press any buttons or try to stop that action. And we have two independent group of participants. And after each of these stop trials, group 1 participants reported the time when they heard the tone, meaning the time when they detect that tone. And group 2 participants reported when they decide to stop or in other words, when they make the decision to stop their action. And they use the mouse cursor to click and report that timing. And analysis and predictions is as such. Here I'll introduce you to another concept which is really critical for our experiment. For example, let's say when we are making an action, we can directly measure how fast we are making that action by means of reaction time. But when we are stopping an action, there is no overt behavior. And because of that, we cannot actually directly measure how fast we are able to stop a prepotent action. So, and as for the reason, the average time taken to stop an action called the stop signal reaction time needs to be estimated. And using a model called independent race model. I will not go into every specific detail about this thing, and here, as is illustrated in the figure given, when a participant is being confronted with a stop signal at time t0, the total time it took for that participant to stop his or her prepotent response will be the SSRT value, which was the time taken to fully stop their action. And this SSRT value, we assume that it is being composed of 3 different stages. The first stage being the perceptual stage, the second stage being the decisional stage, and the last stage will correspond to the activation of the necessary neural machinery to stop an action. And judging from past researches, it seems that people can report the timing of events in the environment fairly accurately. And if I ask them to, even if I ask participants to report the time when they heard the tone, that is when they detect a tone, they might report a timing somewhere around here. But what we are not really sure here is whether, going back to that, and it means that it means that participants have conscious access to the perceptual stage if they are able to report the tone time. And as I have said, people are able to report the timing of events in the environment fairly accurately. And what we are not really sure here is whether they have conscious access to this decisional stage here. So, and our hypothesis goes as such. Hypothesis 1 is that participants will be able to report the tone time, and this will be correlated with SSRT. And since we are not really sure whether if people have conscious access to the decision time, hence not able to report it accurately, we frame hypothesis to in such a way that if participants do not have conscious access to this decision timing, then the reported decision time will be uncorrelated with SSRT, meaning that it will be random. Or it might still be positively correlated with the SSRT, but in which case it is highly likely that they are just reporting the time when they heard the tone. So in that case, the reported tone time and decision time will be basically similar. And if participants actually have some level of conscious access to the decisional stage or decision time, then the decision time will be positively correlated with the SSRT, and that the tone time and decision time will be distinct. And hypothesis 3 goes something that like this: reported timings, whether if either the tone time or the decision time will be different for successful and failed stop trials. And let's go into the results section and let's see how hypothesis 1 turns out. The hypothesis goes like this: participants can report the tone time, and this will be correlated with SSRT. And for that, as we calculated the SSRT value for each participant, and we compare that value against the reported tone time. And as we can see, the tone time precedes the SSRT by around 174 plus or minus 17 milliseconds. And it is also positively correlated with the SSRT value. And this distribution comes from the gap between the reported tone time, represented with black dots in the figure, and the SSRT, represented by the red dot in the figure. And please have this distribution in your memory because it will come up again later on. And yeah, the upper figure, which is what we have recently looked at. So we did the same thing for group 2 participants, that is those participants who reported the decision time. And here, as we can see, the reported decision time precedes the SSRT by around 999 plus or minus 10 milliseconds. And it is also positively correlated with the SSRT value. And what about the distribution which comes from the gap between the reported decision time and the SSRT value? Is it similar to the previous distribution that we have looked at, or is it different from that distribution? And yeah, as we can see, the distribution resulting from the gap between the reported decision time and the SSRT value is significantly different from the distribution which resulted from the gap between the reported tone time and the SSRT. And it might point to the direction that we might have some level of conscious access to the decisional stage that I have shown in earlier figures. And one might argue that since you are not doing a repeated measure, and participants' ability to stop an action might actually affect their reported timing. So in order to address this question, we did a simple t-test between both group of participants. That is, we compared the SSRT value, and as we can see, there is no meaningful difference between the participants of both groups in their ability to stop an action. And let's now go to hypothesis 3 and see how it turns out. Reported timings will be different for successful and failed stop trials was the hypothesis. And as we can see, the reason why we're looking at the reported timings when participants are able to successfully stop their action versus when they are not is because it might be somewhat logical to assume that when people detect the tone really quickly or when they are making the decision really quickly, it might be the case that they will be better able to stop their action or not. But it turns out that the decision timing or how fast you make the decision or how fast you detect the tone is not as necessarily affecting your ability to stop an action. The upper half of the figure represents the group 1 participants, and the lower half of the figure represents group 2 participants. And yeah, we did not see any significant difference for either group. And let's go to the conclusion now. And can participants report the tone time? It might be safe to say, yeah, participants can report the tone time, and the tone times, the reported tone times were positively correlated with SSRT. And can participants report the decision time? And as we have already seen, it might be safe to conclude that, yeah, decision times were positively correlated with SSRT and distinct from tone times. That might point to the direction that we might have some level of conscious access to the decisional stage that we hypothesized earlier. And is the decision time or tone time different on the basis of successful and failed stop trials? It turns out that they are not different. And limitations and future directions. The limitation of the study is that, as I have already pointed it out, it's not a repeated measure. We are using 2 independent group of participants. But there's a really good reason for doing this. The first limitation is the forced choice. That is that we require participants to report a timing on every stop trial. And the reason for doing this is that we want participants to actively introspect on every trial. And the second, but as we can see, the SSRT was well correlated, suggesting that the reported timings were not random. And the second limitation will be that different group of participants, as I have pointed it out. But there's a really good reason behind this, as we did not want to bias the participants. And but as we can see, there was no difference in the SSRT value between the 2 groups. And we also relied on self-report because there are no reliable physiological metric of that intention to stop. And in the future, we have pre-registered the study on OSF, and the replication is currently ongoing, and maybe we'll move on to the neural underpinnings. And thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Great job. So we have time for questions. Yes?
Yeah. So you don't have a group where you did not ask them to report the report time or the decision time, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, like having this additional tasks themselves, how much impact could they have on the stop signal reaction time?
Can you please repeat your question?
So in a standard stop signal reaction time, you don't ask them to report the onset time of the stop signal or the decision time.
Yeah.
Right? But in both the groups you conducted, they have to do the additional tasks to monitor the onset type of the stop signal task or when they made the decision to stop. Having these either of these additional tasks, how much impact would they have on stop signal performance itself?
That I might not be having a satisfactory answer to that question, but that's a really good question. Maybe we could potentially include that additional standard stop signal task in the replication stage to see how it's affecting the performance. As of now, I do not have a satisfactory answer to the question that you are posing. And the reason for the prolongated SSRT values is that since we are using the modified anticipatory response inhibition task where the target line which will basically be the reaction time, is put at 900 milliseconds. So, and as for the reason when we are calculating the SSRT value using the integration method, the SSRT value tends to be prolongated.
Great, thanks.
Hi.
Another question? Yep.
Hi, thanks. Can you sort of comment on, there is some literature on potential confounds with the Libet task, right?
Yeah.
For example, the fact that you have to monitor the clock itself, and the assumption is that the timing process is not affected by paying attention to the clock itself, which we know from attention and time literature that it does. So similarly in your case, the fact that they sort of partially related to what Srikanth already asked, the fact that they also have to monitor the time, right? And you are assuming that process itself is not going to interfere or interact with whatever else that you are measuring.
Yeah.
Is there a way to address that potential confound?
So, I don't think there, as of now, I do not have any good way of circumventing the confound which you have pointed it out just now. Maybe we could potentially maybe include some extra measure where participants might be more in some type of naturalistic environment where they do not necessarily need to monitor the clock timing while they are performing the task. But I don't think that thing might be totally I don't think we can circumvent that thing which you pointed it out. Because we need the self-reported timing of participants. And as I have pointed it out, there are no reliable physiological metric for such intention. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Any more? All right. Nice job. Thank you. All right, so let's move on to the next speaker, Indrajit from Edmund and Lily Safra Center for Brain Sciences, talking about automatic pause and deliberate stop mechanisms in the basal ganglia.
Good morning. In this talk, I will be talking about automatic pause triggered by salient stimuli that capture attention and stopping mechanism and stop or inhibition and related basal ganglia mechanism. And this is a monkey study. So one example of inhibition is suppose you are about to cross a road and suddenly a vehicle appears. And in this situation, you need to inhibit your plan to move or cross the road. But there are studies that show that even if other salient event occurs, that doesn't require to stop. For example, loud horn somewhere else, still we momentarily pause. And that conflict, that makes the finding of inhibition, like we cannot say whether the result is due to sudden appearance of the stop signal or any salient signal. So this study addressed this issue. So normally we use stop signal task. I will explain the task first. So this is example of standard stop signal task. This is the eye movement version of the task. And there are go and stop trial. In a go trial, a circle appears at the center. Monkey need to maintain fixation here. Then the circle jumps to the left or right. And monkey need to make a saccade within a deadline. These are the go trial. In stop trial, initially everything remains the same. Fixation appears, monkey fixate. Then the circle jumps to the left or right. But after some delay, another signal appears. Here it's a square. It acts as a stop signal. And in this situation, the monkey is required to cancel the movement, like the plant to move to the left or right. And the delay between the jump of the circle to the left or right and the appearance of the square or stop signal is called stop signal delay, and it is adjusted such a way that in half of the trial monkeys are able to successfully inhibit and half of the trial fail. So, and this is very critical. So this is the standard task. But as I said that because stop signal is appearing suddenly and it's very salient at the center, that captures attention and it triggers automatic pause. And there are different studies that shows like stimuli like that create a surprise and that doesn't instruct to stop. That also captures attention and create a momentary pause. So this gives rise to the recent debate of how to dissociate the automatic pause and response inhibition. And theoretically, there are two models, two group of models. Race model that suggests that that normally doesn't talk about the signal processing or perceptual step, but recent model pause then cancel model based on the rodent and basal ganglia finding that says that stop appears in two steps. First is like whenever any signal appears, it doesn't need to be a stop signal. There is some kind of pause in the process. And then later if the signal is a stop signal, then the cancel process is triggered. So it's a two-step process. And both models implicate basal ganglia pathways, like go pathways for generation of the movement or the go movement, and hyperdirect pathways for automatic pause or inhibition both. And PTC model suggests that indirect pathway is more for the selective stopping, especially from a connection from GPE to striatum, which is like novel in the rats. So to dissociate the salient signal processing and inhibition, we added another block of trial that's called continue trial. And continue and stop trial are almost similar. Only difference is that instead of the square, a rotated square appears. And in this condition, the monkey is required to ignore the signal and make a saccade. So that way we can physically measure the signal like square, and we can dissociate the inhibition and the salient signal processing. And normally in a monkey study, we require 2 monkeys to replicate the findings, and we do a lot of session and lot of trials. And in basal ganglia, we were able to record thousands of neurons, almost 6,000 neurons. And from input of the basal ganglia, like caudate and putamen, and we also had neurons from globus pallidus external. So this is the task, and this is the brain area. This is the behavioral result. So in figure A, so dotted lines and solid lines are for different monkeys, and performance is plotted against stop signal delay, like the delay between the go signal and stop signal or go signal and continue signal. And red lines are like error in stopping. You can see that as the delay between the continue movement and ignore the salient continue signal in almost 30% of the trial, and accuracy was very good in almost all the SSTs. So we can say that monkeys were able to ignore the signal and make a continuous saccade. In B, we saw the reaction time distribution for each session, and blue symbols are for the go versus continue RT comparison. And you can see that even though the monkey were able to ignore the signal and make the continuous saccade, the reaction time was longer. So it has a RT cast. So different squares and circles are for different monkeys. And red symbols is for comparison for go and error stop reaction time. And we can see that almost all the sessions, monkeys were faster in reaction time when they make the error. That's also quite standard in the stop signal task. Figure C and D is the reaction time in continue and error stop, separated by each SSD. And let's focus on C. And all the reaction time was aligned on the signal onset, because studies shows that pause is normally occurs around 100 millisecond and it's aligned. And dotted lines is for continue RT, and initially the continue RT distribution increases, then before a society or around 100 millisecond there is decrease, and then there is a pause, and then the reaction time RT recovers. And for all SSDs, pause appears to happen at the similar timing. And the solid lines are for error stop RT, and they seems quite similar to the fast continue RT. So like there was almost overlap between the two, and we found the difference in both monkeys, like pause. In one monkey, pause was longer, around 45 millisecond, and in other was like around, I think, 20 millisecond. So in sum, we can say that monkey can ignore the signal, but it has a RT cast, and there is a pause in behavior. Okay, so next we were interested to see that those neurons which might be encoding the go process, like generation of the movement, and how they react in the continued trial. So to this end, we selected neurons which had high firing rate and contralateral movement around the saccade compared to baseline, and they also decreased their response, like firing rate in the correct stop trial. So green is the go, slow go, and blue is the continue, and black is the correct stop, and it's separated by A and B. It's like different monkeys. And you can see that initially the activity for all condition starts increasing, and in a stop trial it decreases and it never recovers. However, in the blue graph, which is continue, initially the activity increases, but suddenly it dips, and then it recovers. So this can be a kind of neural mechanism for the pause. And this is the quantification of the pause for each SSD, and black is overall. So we normally measure the mean firing rate in 0 to 200 millisecond. That was the duration when we saw the pause in the behavior. And we can see that all the, so decrease in the continue was significant for all the SSDs, like first 3 SSDs where we have enough trial, and for both monkeys. And this pause was like very small in monkeys A, but it was significant for all SSDs. And whenever there is a filled symbol, it means the result was significant. So we think that this might be the neural mechanism of the pause. And these neurons were from the caudate. Next, we were interested in neurons which might be encoding for the stop process, and see whether they react to the continuous signal. To this end, we searched for neurons which had higher firing rate and correct stop compared to firing rate before the stop. And we found a lot of neurons, almost 20% of the neurons, around 500 neurons. And we found stop neurons in caudate, putamen, and GPE. And as you can see that all neurons increase the firing rate in correct stop, that's the black, that's by the selection. But neurons in the caudate and putamen, they also increase their firing rate in the blue, that's correct continue. So in a way, we can say that these neurons care about the stopping and processing the salient signals. Interestingly, in GPE, there was no significant effect between go and continue. So maybe like they only care about the selective stopping, not the salient signal processing. This is the quantification, like firing rate in 200 millisecond. And you can see the unfilled symbols are for the GPE, and other two is for the stop neuron in caudate and putamen. So in sum, we can say that stop neurons does care about the salient signal processing. And this is interesting because In putamen, normally fMRI study shows that it's activated, but in single level it was not shown. Next, we move to the error monitoring or trial outcome. So normally to compare the error for the go, we normally measure the RT because to rule out the effect of the movement preparation. So we compared fast go with error stop and fast continue. And this pinkish color is the go in all condition. And here, because results were quite similar, so we did not separate the PSTS for the monkey-wise, and we average across the monkey. And A is go neuron in the caudate, and B and C is stop neuron in caudate and putamen. We can see that all neurons seems to have higher firing rate in fast continue and error stop compared to go. So it seems, okay. So it seems that they do care about the salient signal processing and error. And this is the quantification, go versus error stop. And this is go versus continue. So all neurons in all monkeys had higher firing rate. Another interesting thing here is like the difference between go and error is often interpreted as error monitoring, but there can be confound of the salient signal processing. And here we had continuous signal, so we can see the difference between error and fast continue as true error monitoring. And normally stop neurons did that. So maybe like that's the true error monitoring signal. And we found similar kind of finding in the GPE, like neurons care about the error monitoring, salient signal processing, and they differentiated between the continue and error stop. Okay, so in sum, we can say that salient continuous signal triggers a pause in the behavior and go neurons, and striatal stop neurons are also activated in continue trials, but not in GPE. And error monitoring or trial outcome is encoded in almost all areas recorded here. And this relates to like, this seems like that stopping is occurring in two processes. Like first is pause, like any signal, whether it's stop or not, triggers some kind of activation, and then the cancel process is triggered. Thank you. So this is the building.
Thank you. Nice job. Questions?
Hi. So there are two aspects to it. One is that you are finding neurons in all regions of basal ganglia. Second is that the cortical connections that these different regions are receiving are actually very distinct. So what do you think, because we normally associate these movements with the go, what do you think is actually contributing to the stop, given that the cortical signals would be coming from very, very different sources?
So normally, like traditionally, it is thought that caudate is connected with FEF and pre-SMA, but there are different studies that means in reality it is connected to everything. And for stopping, like fMRI, people say that it's mostly subthalamic nucleus, which is like giving rise to stopping. And one study that says that there is some archipalliidal neurons from GPE to striatum itself, like in caudate. But we tried with optogenetics here. We did not find in monkeys, that were in rats. We also tried with the electrical stimulation. We did not find those neurons. So we think that maybe like via STN or even by like directly from the pre-SMA, the signal can come to the striatum. And I think it's very hard to say that which part is actually triggering the stop.
Yeah, following up on this, the question, what is the percentage of neurons where you see, you have actually polled around 3,000 neurons, right? What percentage of them exhibit this behavior? And also second thing is that what I understand is you see a distinct difference between GP external and the rest of the, which in some sense points out that the origin or the target of these connections being quite distinct, GP is being the output side versus the other is the input side, you do see the distinction. I think, right? Although within caudate, different zones, at least in humans, seem to have the very anterior part more to the dorsolateral, prefrontal, the medial, right? So there is some distinction. I don't know about monkeys, but that distinction is significant, right?
Yeah, okay, so first question is like how many percentage of neurons we get. So normally we get maybe around 20% of the neurons, and it's a lot, like around 500 neurons. In both conditions, in stop and go neurons, and we remove the overlapping neurons, so it's around 20%. And in terms of GPE, so it's like GPE is thought to implement the selective stopping. So yes, we did not find the continuous signal is like activating early response in GPE. And normally GPE response is very, very slow in other tasks also. But problem here is like, so normally in stop signal task, everything is interpreted in terms of stop signal reaction time, which in the previous talk it was around 600 millisecond, but in monkeys it was 85 millisecond. So to make any valid claim, both the things should come within that thing. So it's like, but yeah, so GP can be like more selective, and striatum is like more, and striatum can also get signal from the anterior cingulated cortex, which is more for detection of conflict and other stuff. So that can drive the behavior.
I have a quick question. So you record from both left and right hemispheres, or just from one? And
okay, so for laterality in humans there is laterality, but in monkeys there is no evidence of lateralities. Okay. So I started in one monkey with left hemisphere, like that surgery was already planned. In the next monkey, I thought that right may be more relevant. We went for the right, but results are similar. Okay. And in monkeys, lateralities is like
so
not
the
studied.
Direction of the saccade doesn't matter.
No, direction of the saccade matters. Like, so normally, okay, so contralateral activity is always higher.
Right.
But laterality means whether you record in the left or right, it doesn't matter, like the humans. Like in humans, normally people say right IFG and right part is more for inhibition.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Nice work. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Chahak Sanduja, please.
Observe behaviorally that in continued trials we see slower reaction time in comparison to go reaction time. In stop trials, on the other hand, we see that the probability of failing to stop is greater at longer SSDs, and this plot is called the inhibition function, which we would be using for fitting the stop trials. Now I'll just go over the details of the experiment again, just to recap. So 2 macaque monkeys performed the task. And again, neural activity was recorded from the basal ganglia, which is involved in both initiation and inhibition of actions. Now, I'll just go over the theoretical frameworks of action stopping, which were used to build the models. Now, there are many frameworks that have been given, but I will focus here only on the major 2. So we start with the independent race model. The independent race model assumes that the go and stop processes are 2 independent processes which race. And whoever wins the race basically wins, that process is implemented. So you can see in the figure, in the green we have go, in the red we have stop or pause. And basically, whichever process wins the race, that behavior would be implemented. So like in this figure, the stop has won, so the behavior would be inhibited. Yeah, so the winner will determine the behavior. Now, an alternative framework that has been proposed recently is the pause and cancel model. And the pause and cancel model argues for a two-stage stopping process. So we start with the first stage, which is a pause. The pause is a faster global process. So in the figure, you can see the red would be the pause. And cancel is a later process. So the cancel acts to selectively terminate the response. So in the original paper that we have used to conceptualize the model, basically when the pause wins, we see a threshold update. So for the go process, now takes longer to win because the threshold has jumped from the baseline. And this jump in the threshold accounts for the longer RTs that we see in the continued trials. And this also basically buys more time for the cancel to win and then inhibit the response. Now we extended the independent race model to account for the 3 trial conditions that we had. And we call it the extended race model. So I'll go over how both of these models have been used in all the 3 type of trials: go, continue, and stop. I'll start with the go. Okay. So for the go trials, the fitting process has been similar across both the models. We can see that the go activity starts to accumulate at a certain time t, and then it basically accumulates to the threshold. And in the time that it takes to reach the threshold, at that time, that is the RT value. There is a component of visual delay. The afferent delay that we have used here is 50 millisecond, and this has been based on some literature. And this is the time that the subject takes to process the stimulus that has appeared on the screen. So for the continue trials, both the models have different conceptualizations, and I will go over it. So if we look at the extended race model, in the green we have go 1, and we have a simple race between the go 1 and the pause. So when the pause wins, the go 1 response is inhibited, but the go 2 can win. And to make it more clear, both the go 2 and pause starts accumulating after the subject sees the continuous signal. There would be a delay between the presentation of the go signal and the continuous signal. And so, especially at earlier SSDs, we will see that the RTs come from go 2, which will lead to longer RTs. Now for the pause and cancel model, basically when the pause wins, there is an upgrade in the threshold. So the threshold will jump from the baseline threshold to a certain height, and then that would buy the extra time for go to win. And this will lead to the longer RTs in the continued trials. So for the stop trials in the independent race model, it's a simple race that I have mentioned before. So whichever process wins the race, that response would be executed. But in the pause and cancel model, now there will be 2 processes. So the pause wins, and then the threshold is upgraded, which buys more time for both either go or cancel to win. So in the figure, you can see that the cancel has won, so the response has been inhibited. I'll just go over the fitting process that we used. First, we used data that was pooled across 29 to 30 sessions for both the subjects. Model fitting was performed separately for both left and right responses since the distributions were pretty different. All processes were implemented as non-leaky stochastic accumulators, so we did not have a leak parameter, and we did have a randomness added, like Gaussian noise added at each time point. We fixed the afferent delay of 50 millisecond, assumed for all conditions, so for all trials. The fitting sequence was kept constant across both the models. It was first for go trials, then continue, and then stop. Now I will just go over how the fits looked and how the results were. So for the go process, we optimized 2 parameters, the drift rate or the mu go, and sigma go, which is the noise or the variability at each time point. Now, if you look at the fits, the green you have simulated and the gray is empirical. We have both the PDF and the CDF here. The goodness of fit measures were satisfactory, so we fixed these parameters and then we went on to fit the continued trials. So for the extended race model, we had 3 parameters here. We had the drift rate of the pause process, the sigma or the noise for the pause process, and the proportion of pause active during the continued trials. Again, the color scheme is constant, so in green you can see the simulated
stress issues. And therefore, there's something that we need to do at a larger scale to somehow change the mood in the university, in the societal structure, where things look more positive, where that positivity is towards a sense of purpose, not just in terms of having more money to get more materialistic goods. So how do we bring in more contentment in people? Okay. And so that's become an important issue which games are able to straddle and help you play with and practice with. Okay. How do you navigate some of these? The last example I want to give, which is sort of very hardcore and rooted in discussions that we've had earlier, is a paper by Adam Ghazali, which was published in Nature, I think about 2 years ago, called a game called NeuroRacer, which is the only FDA-approved ADHD intervention available today. So they are saying that it plays the role of what a pill might actually does for ADHD, and has been now FDA approved and is actually being tested as an intervention for ADHD, and has shown excellent responses. So like I said, there are games like GeoGuessr, beautiful way to teach students geography. Okay. It's time for us to start exploring some of these games, realizing that there are really very few neuroimaging studies that have been done with them, really just a handful. A bunch of cognitive science studies have been conducted, but there are many, many more to be done. And that's something that I think as a group of people we should begin to think about, and if used imaginatively could actually be something that contributes to a growing industry today, but we'll actually have evidence-based games and interventions that we can put out there, which right now is our biggest challenge. There are too many games out there which are being publicized and promoted without any scientific backing. And so as, I almost feel as an association, we need to take up this mantle of trying to change some of those conversations and say which of those don't work and which of them work. And here's the evidence that we've started to collect as we go about them, and conduct some large-scale studies that we can do in collaboration.
Thanks for sharing those examples, ma'am. Actually, I would have loved to have such playful environments during my school days, such exams and some similar lecture halls. So let's move on to Dr. Vicky. So can you please describe a specific example from diagnostics or mental health games which provide early markers of, let's say, some sort of cognitive impairment that you have found?
Before I talk about that, I'll show you some short videos which will show you like how aging accident. Okay?
Sir, your screen is not visible. Hello, Vicky sir, your screen is not visible. So your video's screen was not visible. We could not see the video. Just a second, we are seeing if there is a technical error on our side. Yeah, sure. So I would like to open this to audience now. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them.
Am I audible? Am I audible? Yeah. So this question is to both of you, Nandini and Shraddha. I think relatively recently there's a change taking place. One of the most foundational change, I would say, in the society that some thinkers like Jonathan Haidt and others described as shift from a play-based childhood to mobile-based childhood. And this is, I still started around 2010 or something in the West, and little followed by India and other parts in so. But when you say play, when you say like game, it incorporates both of these aspects, like play and mobile. So there could be play like cricket, outdoor games, and also like virtual games or mobile-based games. So what is your take on this, or your opinion on this? Because this is also very highly controversial, because like there are many other thinkers who think that, where the Jonathans and others mainly highlighted on the negative aspect of this, who thinks that this is one of the one of the main reasons of this mental health concerns of the present youth. But there are other thinkers as well, other thoughts as well. So what's your take on this?
Sure, it's very pertinent question, and something that Bharat and I were discussing yesterday in the evening, and particularly in the context of a new much discussed book called The Anxious Generation, okay, which talks about this. So there's no doubt that there is something called a gaming addiction, okay. There's something called a gaming addiction, there's also something called a drug addiction, okay, which is something which we want to keep on the side. It exists, and I think a lack of balance in anything one does could lead to an addiction. And gaming is not the only reason, okay. Young people are using Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or whatever, to just showcase pictures of themselves. It has nothing to do with games at all, okay. So the whole reason of why the social media addiction should sort of interfere with the positive role that games can play is important to keep in mind. Having said that, the emphasis that we want to certainly make is there are aspects to play that can be very useful in a classroom and a learning setting, which need to come in. There are also aspects to some digital games, which when used and built in the right modality, can be extremely useful supports to teach learning in the classroom, especially now that we know that if you have 30 students in your classroom, it's not one size fits all, but there are 30 different students sitting in your classroom. So it affords a very powerful multimodal way of trying to address learning, and therefore should always be used with caution and with awareness. Having said that, the power of what it is able to do in terms of, especially where a practice effect is involved, it could be extremely useful. You're teaching a child phonological awareness and you need to go to somebody who does intervention 40 kilometers away, 3 times a week, and the parent is not able to do it even once in the week for an entire month, really impacts the child's learning. At such points in time, can the child in support with the parent play that game on a regular basis and thereby improve it? So like every carrot, it has two sides to it, and we're completely aware that this is there. But just because there is this fear, we don't want to really abandon this, but certainly want to advocate using it with caution, one. And I think this is precisely the reason why we need good research to support how to use it, when to use it, and the extent to which it can improve. So that we also don't go ballistic with what it's able to do in terms of transform you. But it's also very exciting to know what it's been able to do in terms of rescue people, in terms of enhancing their skills and opening up a whole new world of sort of learning and adventure for them.
A related question to this is that in your experience, do you find like if you compare the digital games with like maybe more physical games, so did you find any difference in like learning or other behavioral patterns, like if you consider just the games?
To be honest, Dipanjan, I've never done a comparison myself, and nor have I seen one done so far. I've seen the challenges that people have reported. So now there's a digital Ludo available and there's an in-person Ludo available. And when we had our class presentations, there were enough people for and against both of them. So there are benefits to both, and this is precisely maybe a kind of study that we can do, that what is it that digital Ludo was able to do but this was not, and vice versa. So, but not too many studies available comparing the same game in two different formats.
Add very recent, it's a 1992 meta-analysis on use of games, especially amongst school students, found out that it was most effective. Overall the results was pretty mixed. Of the 64 odd researchers that were analyzed, only 22 sort of showed that games were better than, showed greater learning, better achievement of learning outcomes compared to conventional classroom instruction. But it was most effective in maths. So I think something that research said, which actually aligns with a little bit of what I've observed in my practice, is when the focus of the game, the learning outcome is absolutely clear. Sometimes, and it happens a lot in like math, there's a lot of drill and practice sort of games, repeated, practice. It tends to work better, but if the goal is a little more abstract, it may or may not work, especially in my work in technology adoption. And this is not just with kids, but with adults as well. We've seen online, like anything that's either, digital formats don't work as well as very hands-on, because it's a lot of, do I feel confident enough to do it? Do I have the support if I require? I need scaffolding, hand-holding. I need to talk to my peers while doing that. So the effect tend to be better. We've just done some AI workshops for faculty in universities, and really good results of in-person workshops compared to digital workshops that we've done in the past.
Yeah, just quickly, really fascinating discussion, and thank you so much for this. My question is actually pretty simple. I'm curious how and when you're measuring outcomes and what exactly are they? So for example, when you talk about prosociality and so on, what are you measuring? Are you measuring anything as an outcome afterwards? And what exactly is it? And when do you, like, how long are these effects lasting, for example?
So the one on prosociality, and Bhumika, feel free to join in this discussion. There are good measures for prosociality in terms of self-reports, which are used pre and post. These are done, so there's one done before they come into the study, and then one done after the study, and then ideally you want to do that 6 months after the study to see how long these efforts persist. Then there are measurements that we are doing within, so when the prosociality course was discussed, the whole notion of prosociality firstly is extremely new for young people. And we designed a very interesting, very visually rich, engaging course on prosociality. And as you navigate the course, there are measurements built in as you interact with the course, which provide some insights into your outcome. So it tells you a little bit also about something that we've been discussing on your strategy, on are all children going towards prosociality the same way, or are they going differently? Because they actually respond to certain prompts, and through those, through a semantic analysis of those prompts, you get an insight about how different people are approaching prosociality. So those are the two that we have right now in terms of pre and post. And do you want to talk about the task?
So just to add to that, so we tried 2 validation studies because we thought that we could probably use experimental paradigms and do some pre and post evaluations. And there we used a resource allocation task, and we also used a trust and reciprocity game. It did help in terms of understanding what effects it would have. But I would like to add a caveat here, because we were using an open source game, which is Sky. Now that has certain elements and a certain design, right? What we need to do rather is to design a game which maps with your experimental paradigm very well, so that you can actually look at the pre and post, because otherwise the effects are there but difficult to explain every aspect of the effect that we get. The other was that if you use an intervention, say for example a week I play a game and I want to see the effect, there is a difference between this one compared to when we used the course that MGIP had developed and we interleaved with the game, the levels of the game, and they were mapped. That showed a much better and a long-term effect, because we did 1 month and 3-month follow-ups as well. So
the game by itself doesn't do as much as the game accompanied with the course.
Yeah, no, this is really interesting, because one big challenge with this type of stuff is generalization to the real world, right? So one can feel more pro-social, self-report at the end of the thing, months later, but that knowledge doesn't translate into their actions in terms of them being more kinder in their life with other people, right?
We've been doing teacher reports too now.
Yeah, so I think really, think about it, to really, that is the key measure, that, have their actions changed after.
Yeah, teacher reports, parent reports. It's just that, like you always know, collecting all of this data is a challenge, but yes, that's the true translation.
Thanks a lot. Actually, the last question was sort of my first question, so in those lines, but I guess you have addressed it somewhat. But just to take it further, like as I understand, this whole paradigm of experiential learning emerged as like to the conventional learning, like, which was, though the experiential learning was more physical and social in nature. I mean, you go out in the field kind of thing, right? So, but now that we are trying to gamify this, which certainly has a wider reach, I mean, it really goes, you can really cater to a lot of people, which I see as a clear and distinct advantage. But then there comes these conflicts where whether these effects are lasting or not, which I think earlier, the question was, right? So that needs to be more revalidated, I think, with neuroimaging tools and things like that. And that's one way forward. I think that's one. So having said that, is there a conflict you find? Like there are certain areas of experiential learning where if you try to gamify it, it can go more harm than actually do good, like that. Like doctor said, do no harm. That's the first doctrine, right? So is there something like that in this whole game world?
There's one aspect that I certainly can
And that's
report.
Dipanjan being a doctor, that was the hint there, right? So
Is, so when we were doing this whole study with empathy, and we created a game to measure empathy. So empathy is essentially trying to understand the emotional states of the other. And there are two aspects to empathy. There's something called cognitive empathy and there's something called affective empathy. So cognitive empathy is your understanding that I know what you're going through. Okay? And affective empathy is actually beginning to feel exactly what the other person is also beginning to feel. Okay? Now, affective empathy has been shown to lead to personal distress too. Because you get so engaged and involved with what's happened to somebody else. It's not happened to you, but because it's happened to somebody else and you're so involved with that person, and this has been shown in young girls, that's led to personal distress. Okay? And therefore, there's always a caveat that whenever you're teaching somebody affective empathy, first ensure that you teach cognitive empathy well and you teach self-compassion. Okay? Self-compassion is a concept that young people, and in fact, I think adults also don't practice. We are very hard on ourselves as people. But we've begun to see that as you introduce the idea of compassion and self-compassion, that you can do good for the other only as long as you are in a good state. So you can't afford to get affected. You can know what's happening, feel for it, but you stay in that good state so you can actually rescue the other. These are extremely difficult concepts. I think as adults, we are still figuring them out. But the fact that there are some young people who've actually figured them out, some of them have been impacted by it, some of them have been able to do good with them, is where some of this cognitive science comes in trying to understand which are those traits that are actually protective and help you navigate this the right way versus being kind of taken over. And that's where personality traits are showing up as aspects. So individual differences play a big role here.
To add an interesting thing that's actually connected to Duolingo about, what are the practices to avoid. What's happened in Duolingo when it was introduced, you'll see so much material research on streaks, like this idea of streak, that, you get a streak for every, it was a habit building interface that was added to Duolingo. The idea was that, you keep adding up your streaks and that motivates you to practice every day. So it was designed with a great thing in mind. But what ended up happening, and now if some of you, if you are on Duolingo, there are elite groups. So if you've added like 500,000 plus streak, you are in a certain kind of elite group of Duolingos. Over time, because it became so important for people to keep their streak and be part of that elite group, Duolingo, and obviously it's a private company after all, introduced a paid feature where you can pay Duolingo some money to keep your streak without actually practicing, right? That happened. So there's a feature on Duolingo, you can pay, skip a lesson, and then you can still continue your streak. So maybe this guy who had 1,200 streaks actually paid some money to keep his streak. So that's something to be aware of. Like that's what gamification in private companies is actually doing.
For a minute,
right?
I was
because the people are just now looking to keep the streak. The extrinsic motivation is so high that the whole goal, I'm sure that guy got into Duolingo to actually learn Spanish, but like he's not learned it, and that's happened with a lot of users. So that's something really to keep in mind.
I was in a mortal fear because my daughter and myself were in this streak of Duolingo, and I gave up. My daughter is still pursuing that streak. So anyway,
so paid, sir. You could.
No, I could. I felt. So, one other question which is on a different line. So Nandini touched on it briefly, but I think I want you to dig a bit deeper because the last meeting I went to, this National Academy of Sciences, there was some product developer presenting their work on mental health and this game again on kind of targeting this particular thing. And we don't, not only one conference, every conference we go to, there will be some new name product. Now, we should really talk about a guideline, in terms of a regulatory approval body of even before somebody is selling this product. Because everybody, when you talk to people in general, like if you recently in Indian, that science festival, International Science, IISF, the most visited stall was NBRC's because it had brain in it and somebody was doing an EEG live. So everybody is interested in the brain, and the minute you sell a product with some brain like pictures and data, it becomes very enticing and for the people. So isn't there some kind of role that you guys can play in kind of setting up sort of a regulatory framework, which
I think it will become we guys. It doesn't exist right now, but we started a conversation on this at Games for Change 2 years ago. The need for a regulatory framework, which has participation of the government, and sort of, there's some mandate around that.
So I think this question has set up really well for what I want to ask. All these games that this is like more of a comment. So we have multiple learning systems, multiple memory systems. And when we talk about subliminal levels of learning, subconscious, then you go into, more conscious ways of learning, declarative memory and stuff. So when you look at games, what type of mechanism of learning and memory do you tap into socio-emotional learning? So you're trying to build an awareness of a certain aspect, and then like others asked, how long do these effects last? And how long can you persist in a certain format to learn? How much of change is required after certain periods of time for incremental learning? And then how does this incremental learning maybe change across subliminal levels versus more conscious levels, like cognitive levels, where you're aware of how you're building your knowledge repertoire?
We can have another panel discussion on all the comments that you made.
Broad.
I will just touch upon one aspect, and then maybe we can take it offline because I'm conscious of time. But the whole, sorry, I've lost my train of thought. It'll come back. Sorry, I'll come back to it in a bit. But in terms of social emotional learning, the one aspect, at least in terms of gratitude and compassion that has been shown, is over a period of time, and this is, you can look at another very nice paper called Crystals of Cador that was tested by Richie Davidson and group, where over a period of time, because the game made them do certain activities of gratitude, of compassion, the people playing the game began to realize after a period of time that every time they played that, they had a better day, okay? And the game kind of tried to instill this in them. Initially, they were consciously told them, tell us how you're feeling. And then over a period of time, they stopped asking them that question. But if a positive habit, if a positive activity can lead to a habit which can help you improve your well-being and gets into your daily practice, then there is some optimism to think that it might persist, because it's a realization that you know, but you've not been able to do. I use this as my example for physiotherapy. For 50 years of my life, I tried to tell myself to exercise, and I didn't. And I had spine surgery last year. And I had to get exercise to be able to walk. Okay? And I had to do it for 6 weeks. But after 6 weeks, when I began to see the improvements that it has brought into me, I persisted to it till a year later. I can give you experience that I do my exercises every day because I know how much better I will feel in the course of the day. Okay? And for me, that's on a personal anecdote, is one signature that if there's something that makes you feel better and you become better at it and makes it into a habit, that's probably our best bet at hoping that that will persist. So what that competency is and how we cultivate it is a separate question. But in terms of long lasting, I think that's the kind of work that we will need to do over a period of time to realize whether that will happen.
Add some interesting, I think gamification holds a lot of promise of integrating games into real world. So one example that comes to my mind is, and I don't remember exactly where this was, they noticed that people were using escalators and lift all the time instead of using stairs. And then they colored the stairs like a piano. And every time you step on them, it makes sound of a piano. And they noticed over time, people's habits changed because it was more fun to take stairs than take lift, etc., right? So these kind of gamification elements are sort of, it's not like you create something outside of the real world, a game outside of the real world, and then you expect that same behavior to actually be passed on to real life. But the gamification element is part of your surrounding. I think gamification also holds a lot of promise in that space.
We can take one more question.
Hello. On a lighter note, I too have a 537-day streak on Duolingo. And no, I didn't. No, I didn't. And I haven't learned anything. So building on the examples like Scar with pro-sociality, I'm curious about how you distinguish genuine cognitive or dispositional change from improved performance within a highly scaffolded and socially supportive system.
So my simple response to that would be that if I'm able to see a change in the classroom or in the school, that would be without anybody watching you or giving you points for it. That would be a way to see if pro-sociality has really tried to become a part of your system. That's how I would look for it.
Yes, but we know that reduced extraneous load, repetition, and group interaction can all boost the short-term outcomes. So, what kind of evidence transfer beyond the game is persistent over time, like or the behavior outside that classroom? So, can we rely on to conclude that these designs are producing durable change rather than context-bound effects? Or what Bjork would call it, an illusion of learning. Like when we have those staircases that are painted like pianos, we are using them, but when we are at our home, and if we do have an access to an elevator or a normal staircase, we will still be using those, using the elevator.
So you're asking the million-dollar question of what can you do to create a habit?
Yes.
Okay. What we are trying to suggest as of now is the game can be an entry into sharing with you or sufficiently conditioning you to actually try out that habit. For many of us, it just remains an intent. It doesn't even get translated into short-term behavior. If we are doing that short-term behavior long enough, one hopes, and as I think it was the tipping point guy who says you need 10,000 hours for it to become a habit or to become mastery at it, to become a master at something. So maybe you don't need 10,000 hours, but maybe you certainly need about at least 100 plus hours, and this might vary across all of us. So in short, I don't have a simple answer to your question. It's probably going to vary across all of us, but there is at least a start in trying it out. That's what we are trying to put out there. And as cognitive scientists, maybe we can start researching what is it that will cause that change. So I don't have a simple answer.
Thank you.
So as we conclude today's discussion, few highlights that so games are not merely a motivational tool or entertainment medium. So these are actually structured environments that have so many things to offer. These are the spaces where emotions, decision making, these things dynamically unfold, right? And as we have tried to make a point that we can use these as experimental tools as well, their use should demand intellectual rigor, ethical sensitivity, and careful design, right? Especially when games move from labs to real world, right? So with that note, I would like to conclude.
So Sajesh, can I come in?
Yes, sir. Okay, sir. Sure.
So I should not have chosen the video.
Yeah.
So I think I lost because of the technical glitch. Anyway, so I like to conclude if you have 1 minute.
Sure, sir. Sure. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So most of the places where we go and talk about games and cognition. So the most common question we asked, it was asked also. So contrary to conventional belief that playing video games is intellectually lazy and sedative or it is very addictive, it turns out that personally have never played shooter video games and randomly assign them to play either a shooter video game or another type of video game for the same period of time. Okay? And research has shown that compared to the control participants, those in the shooter video game condition show faster and more accurate attention allocation and higher spatial resolution in visual processing and enhanced mental rotation abilities. So games that have social values, emotional values, and motivational values, and also the games which we are developing, they are very engaging and immersive and well. Based they play game, we compute their processing speed, we compute their navigation ability, and we also compare we have memory games where we compute their visual short-term memory and also visual short-term memory retrieval speed also. So before I conclude, I like to say that most of the solutions targeting neurological disorders are either diagnostic or rehabilitative, and they are heavily dependent on frequent hospital visits. So there is a need to develop a tool which can estimate the cognitive decline of an individual over the life course so that early anomalies in cognitive performance can be detected and proper clinical care can be taken. Secondly, cognitive rehabilitation through serious pain using state-of-the-art technologies at least unexplored in India, and doing this work we are trying to build a system where we can provide double-arm solution to the problem of dementia in India and abroad. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot. So I would like to invite Bhumika ma'am on stage.
So thank you so much, Nandini, Shraddha, and Satej. And thanks to all of you for the participation in this session. Since most of you agreed that you believe that games have a positive role, so we believe that you either may try a gamified version of your experimental work as well, because in research there are possibilities if we do it very carefully, and definitely for intervention and clinical purposes. So thanks a lot. We have a pleasant thing to do again, the mementos, yeah.
All announcement, we have two belongings over here, a green bottle and a small flask. So does this belong to anyone, this flask? Please. Everyone, please take your belongings from the hall also.